Hi, I'm Matt,
And I'm Kelly.
and we are here today to present our video assessing the impacts of enterprise and entrepreneurial education. Now, this is the end result of a project that we've been engaging in with colleagues from around the UK, and it was a project which was funded by EUK via the EERPF, and we'd like to thank EUK for that. Now, the rest of the team was Nigel Adams, David Boswood, Vic, Rob, AJ, and Makuba, and we'd like to thank all of them for all of their help and support, because without them, we wouldn't have been able to bring this presentation to you today.
Absolutely.
Now, the project was really focused on exploring the impacts of enterprise education interventions. Now, you might ask why we wanted to do that. Well, it's been a hot button topic. Ever since NABI et al. 2017, people have been getting more and more interested in actually what's going on here. And for us, we felt it was a really good time to start to follow up on that and explore whether there was possibilities to create new tools and interventions in this space. And we viewed this as a project with 4 stages: background research to look at what was going on in the literature, a review of existing tools, a review of policy to explore the implications there, and a study which we chose to be a Delphi study to really talk to our peers to get your input and insights from your own practice.
We knew from talking to our colleagues that impact and measuring impact is a really important topic. What we wanted to know, what is out there in the literature, what is out there in publicly available information that can help us with our own practice.
And that's really where we started, with a background literature review. So to make it simple, we just took NABI's model and revisited it. And what we found was that there were 322 articles from the point that NABI finished up until the point that we started, January 2019. Now, the interesting thing is, of those 322 articles, only 18 actually met our criteria, or the criteria laid out in NABI. They had an impact focus, they were in higher education, and they had contextual information that allowed us to make those judgments. Interestingly, most articles didn't, and even where they did, the data they presented was very limited. Now, what we did find was that there was some pedagogical development. It's a bit of an aside, but it was interesting. But a lot of still very traditional delivery, could because a lot of this work is tending to come out of emerging economies. When it came to impact, only 2 papers gave us any longitudinal perspective on what was going on. And that mirrors NABI, so it showed that their results were still relatively current, that we were still dealing with a scenario in which most people were measuring impact was small snapshots, really looking at impact at the end of a particular course or intervention.
One of the things that was very apparent is that there was such limited context, we couldn't always tell, if at all, what impact measurement tools were being used. And for us, this is an important point, because if we want to be able to compare across different courses or different levels of study, we do need to be using consistent impact measurement tools, or at least have an understanding what those tools are actually measuring and why.
And so the next piece of work we did was to take on board what we'd found and actually go out and look at the tools. And we did a very broad assessment. We think it's probably the broadest assessment of these tools that's ever been done. And we found 21 tools from around the world. Now, I'm aware there are some extra ones, but we only found 21 in our initial sweep. We've had some more crop up since then. There was a huge mixture of those tools which were designed for industry and for academia. A lot of them had some academic pedigree. From my perspective, I think it's probably because a lot of them were developed by people like us. So that was something we inbuilt into them when we were building them. But again, most of those tools were designed to offer snapshots. They were not designed to be longitudinal tools. And that could be a snapshot into a personality or a competence or behavior. I'm not going to get into that argument about what we should be looking at. That's a huge argument. The key thing here is that all of this work is now available. It's in the ECT toolkit. So if you want to look at those different tools and get some ideas about which ones you could use, maybe beyond the ones that you're already using or that you're already familiar with, please do go and look at that.
One of the things that becomes quite apparent is some of these tests you will know, for example, the Get2 tests, which is quite commonly used as a teaching tool. What seems to be less clear is if and how some of these impact tools are used as a research tool to help us understand what we do and what works.
I think that's a really interesting area for some development. But next, I think for us, it was the policy review, and that was Kelly's key focus, so I'll let her talk around that.
So what we wanted to do is see, how does our work have wider impact, and particularly what would be brought to the attention of senior managers and policymakers in local and national government, for example. And we started off by having a look at the Teaching Excellence Framework. So every institution that wants a TEF award needs to submit a narrative of what they want to be celebrated for in terms of their educational offer. Now, enterprise and entrepreneurship education, much as we would like it to be, is not a core educational output for most universities. And yet the majority of institutions included a narrative around their enterprise and entrepreneurship education related activity in the documents they submitted for the TEF award. And those institutions that went into detail and gave specific examples about their enterprise and entrepreneurship activity were more likely to be those who got awarded a gold or a silver award, for example. So I think that shows that universities can recognise that enterprise and entrepreneurship education is important to their wider offer. We also had a look at the HEBCE or HEBSIS survey results. We looked at those over a 4-year period of time. And over those 4 years, there was about 4,000 business starts each year across all higher education institutions. And if we had a look at the most recent data that was available when we did this research in 2017-2018, there were around 40 new starts per institution. We also had a look at active companies. There was an average of 1.9 FTE employees and an estimated turnover of £53,500. These aren't big and clever and massively innovative businesses yet, but they have the potential to be so. What's important to recognise is the majority of companies will be self-employed or with a small number of employees. At this stage, this is up to 3 years after graduation. If you have a look at the graph on the slide, this is a graph ranking the number of new starts per institution. So on the left-hand side, the most active institution supported 250 new starts in 2017-2018. And you can see quite a large drop-off. So there are a small number of institutions that supported 100 new starts and a much larger number of institutions that supported 50 or lower new starts. Of the 10 highest ranking institutions, 3 of the 10 were specialist art, music, dance or drama institutions. Now there's a new framework coming out called the KEF, the Knowledge Exchange Framework, and this covers all aspects of an institution's engagement with the community. One of the items that will go into the KEF takes the HEBCE results for new starts and scales at that by the number of students in each institution. We don't know exactly how that's going to be done, so we used a proxy for it in our research, and that allows some of the smaller institutions to shine through. And when you rerun your rankings, 6 of the top 10 are now specialist art, music, dance or drama institutions looking at the KEF metric.
And really, that's great data, and it was really interesting for us to understand that picture. And from there, we decided it was time to get out and talk to everybody. Now, we chose a Delphi study. It's a particular format of study, which is iterative. We chose to do a short, fat study where you would do it quite tight. We didn't quite have time to do that, mainly because we didn't really get all the respondents we needed. We only actually got 8 people who responded to the survey. It gave us some general insights, but really to go deeper, we would need more people and more time, and we need to be able to develop those loops a little bit further. We found there was discussion around measures, skills and attitudes, and that people really wanted some balance between not just the hard business skills, but the softer skills. You know, how do we look at that more holistically? There was a general consensus that need to be measured and that it should be measured over longer time horizons, and we thought that was a really positive thing, even just to come out of that smaller group. It did reinforce the point to us again about tools. People were using very well-known tools and not really much outside of that. So that supported the kind of call we made earlier. There was a viewpoint that any tools that were produced needed to be easy to use, quick to learn, especially for students, not just for staff, customizable in terms of the question sets, and they needed to produce data that was quite easy to interpret and to feed into reports, and especially upwards to management, where a lot of this data was being used. All of this led us to some further challenges that really come out of this, and those are up there. I don't need to belabor them. They're all quite obvious things, but it's really about delving deeper here, because the core thing is that this is a topic with much more room to grow and much more room to develop, and we think that's really important.
I think one of the things that is vital is we need your input, we need your voice. Although we only had 8 participants in the Delphi study, for example, we initially recruited around 40, and so we hoped to be able to have some really interesting data to present today. It didn't happen, it didn't come off. We know there is a lot of knowledge in the community, and we would love at some point in the future to come back to you and see how much of that we can fill in the gaps.
So all that's left for me to do and for Kelly to do today is say thank you for listening, and we look forward to any questions. And one final thank you to EUK for funding the project and to the whole of the team for making it possible. Thank you very much.
Thank you.